So welcome everybody to the November 2022 meeting of Silicon Valley Product Management Association. Happy to see everyone here joining us via Zoom from all over the globe, literally. This evening, we are very privileged to have two senior folks with an immense depth in recruiting and hiring and all of the things that surround that entire set of topics. And it's something that we deal with either from the hiring end or on the searching end, or both, throughout our career. So it's always useful to touch base and find out what the latest developments are. Things evolve and change over time. And as we get to the end of the year, it's a natural thing to look and see, as well as if we're in a growth mode and we're looking to change things up on some of our teams. It's also a time to kind of think about strategy and how to connect up with resources so that we're set for a good 2023. With that, I'd like to introduce both of our speakers. We have Nick Rica from Rica Consulting. He's been in technology, HR, and recruiting for more than 40 years. He's held numerous positions in human resources and recruiting as a manager and individual contributor. Except for a few assignments in biotech, Nick stayed focused within the semiconductor and the high technology markets, which is really central to the Valley here. He has ramped up factories and product lines, managed college recruiting organization, a large company, been responsible for recruiting in many different international locations. He's worked with a lot of ATS tools from the very beginning, and has quite a lot of expertise around ATS, which is, for those of you who are learning this new acronym, it's Applicant Tracking System, and how that operates and how to use that for both searching as well as sourcing. So he's been around like a lot of us, around long enough to see a lot of changes over time. So looking forward to getting some thoughts as to where things are going with the latest changes and where they might go in the future. We also have with us Niti Agrawal from Stage 4 Solutions. Stage 4 Solutions is a trusted provider of consulting and interim staffing services to high-tech companies and government agencies. They were founded in 2001, just shortly after SVPMA itself was founded. They have served over 125 organizations, achieving double to triple digit revenue growth every year since their inception. And they're very devoted to achieving client success. Niti brings over 25 years of marketing and product management experience to clients. Prior to founding Stage 4 Solutions, she held product marketing, channel operations, and business development leadership roles at Oracle, Agile Software, and HP, and was a certified CPA earlier in her career. She's been a speaker at industry associations around Silicon Valley and at leading business schools, including Stanford University, Haas School of Business at UC Berkeley, and Santa Clara University. Niti holds an MBA from Stanford and a BS in accounting and finance with honors from the Wharton School of Business. As a volunteer, Niti currently serves as the chair of the American Staffing Association's Professional Managerial Section Council. And so with that, we should, if this was in person, we'd all be doing a virtual clapping. So hopefully you can find that button somewhere on your Zoom client there. And we want to be very interactive here. So if you've got questions and you're shy, throw them in the chat window. If you want to interrupt with a question or something, you can always raise your hand using the emoji there. We've got a set of topics, and we'll kind of go around the horn here. I'm going to stop sharing because that way it should give more room for people's faces, and you can see who's speaking. Hopefully that works out well. And with that, we will begin this evening's panel. So one of the most common questions we get early on is around search tips. Folks are always wondering how companies are finding candidates, as well as a job search, where people look to find jobs. There's always a mix of friends of friends and LinkedIn and other things. But as someone who's on the inside and sits on both sides of the equation, um, I'd like to invite each of our panelists, starting with Niti, to chime in a little bit on search tips. Niti?
Yeah, sure. Can you hear me okay?
Yes, you're coming through loud and clear.
Okay, just wanted to check. Sometimes I have issues. Here at Stage 4 Solutions, we definitely use many tools to find candidates. So we do have an internal database with an ATS solution, and so that's our first go-to. But then the only other tools we use are Dice, Indeed, and LinkedIn. So those are the 3 job boards we use. But frankly, the vast majority of candidates we find are on LinkedIn. So I think for product managers, that's a number 1 source. And so we use it to find candidates. If someone is a job seeker, I think building up your LinkedIn profile, putting the open to work frame on your picture, making it very clear for recruiters like me and my team to find you is frankly the number 1 way. You can also use LinkedIn to build your network, and that friends of friends that used to be very informal now is all virtual. And LinkedIn is, again, the number 1 place we find candidates. Thank you, Tom.
And Nick, would you like to chime in a bit on the search and find?
Yeah, Niti hit on a key point there. There's 2 ways to get a job. Either they find you or you find them. So you got to be out there in that format, especially today with people mostly working remote. It's even more important. And I've looked at a lot of statistics. Niti and I are going to have a little bit different perspective because I've spent my career mostly on the corporate side, and Niti's organizations support us with driving candidates towards us as another source. But when I talk to people, a lot of people ask me the question, do you really hire people off your applicant tracking system or solution? And I was telling them, yes, we do. And you have to be in that solution, that system, for us to even work you through the process even more now, more importantly than ever before. Even the offer process goes through that solution. So it is one of the necessary hurdles to get yourself into someone's applicant tracking solution if you want to go through the process, and we can share your resume and leave our notes there. But I can't emphasize enough, we find you or you find us, and it works really well that way. And I'll echo what she said. LinkedIn is probably our primary source. I've done a lot of statistical analysis over the years at how things have changed with the source categories. Mind you, we used to source from the San Jose Mercury News and West Tech career fairs and all that. And over the years, Indeed and LinkedIn have become the bigger sources for us. And probably for this audience, it's probably LinkedIn more than anything else, with the nature of the beast for product management. So to be visible there, very important. To have your resume and your profile matching is very important. There are ways to even put your resume on your profile, and that's helpful too.
Very good. I know one of the things that's happened recently, and recently being the last couple of years, is that companies that have gone remote have broadened their search, where before they said, look, I want somebody who's driving distance from my office. And now they're over the pandemic, we're much more open into looking at candidates from farther afield. And I'm wondering what you've seen in that space, whether there's any particular tips for folks that are searching for a job, because you don't want to type in every last city name in the country to find out what's available in your particular subset, as well as, you know, kind of thoughts around what that looks like from both sides. And so, Niti, first, do you have any comments kind of on the remote and how that's been playing out?
Yeah, so I would say the vast majority of our clients are very open to full-time remote workers. We are seeing a small shift to people moving to hybrid, but it's still mostly remote. And I think in terms of job seekers, I mean, for anyone who's not in like a major labor market, like if you're not in the Bay Area, if you're not in RTP, if you're not in Austin, and, you know, a few other places in the country, but you want a product manager role in a high-tech company, it's really great for you because so many jobs are fully remote. And so you're eligible to you know, you're eligible to be considered for those jobs. So I think it's really good in terms of, you know, but that's good because you can have so many more jobs, but it makes job seeking much more broad. And so what I would say is, especially when you're looking for full-time jobs, you probably have like an industry or a product area that you're interested in. So you can assemble a target list of companies. So like I used to be a marketing person, marketing professional. So have a target list of companies you want to work for. You can follow each of them on LinkedIn. And every company out there posts their openings on LinkedIn. So that's an easy way to follow those companies and what they're hiring for. And then you can connect with people you know at those companies and ask for internal referrals to those jobs. So those are just some small tips to look for those remote jobs and effectively use your time when, again, so many companies are hiring fully remotely.
Just a
Those
quick,
are my.
I was to say, quick follow up on that one. How has the interview process changed as a result of going remote? Because that's probably a follow on effect with a similar cause.
Yeah. So what we see, it's all virtual. You know, either all the interviews are on Zoom or Teams or, you know, whatever other video platform companies use. And because the job market is very competitive for companies hiring, we encourage our clients to move quickly and to even do more panel interviews so that the same number of interviewers can talk to a candidate, but they can do it, you know, faster and taking less of the candidate's time. But yeah, all interviews are really virtual. And even for the hybrid roles, Tom, we're seeing primarily virtual interviews, even though the person will go on site sometimes.
Very good. Nick, your thoughts on kind of their whole remote and how that's affected and impacted things?
Sure. You know, to add on to what Niti was saying, it's even interesting when the interviews are on site at the company, a candidate travels to the location, they get stuck in a conference room and they're remote with some people that are working outside of the plant. So it has some dynamics. You know, gone are the days when we tried to get all the interviews done in one day. That's tricky these days, and the remote things kind of lend itself to candidates who are working their schedules. So we could do a little staccato type of interview process for those who are not into music, but, you know, like one little interview at a time. And in the past, we've tried to kind of normalize things by having a presentation to a large group that could log in all at once and then break up into individual interviews. And sometimes it's over a period of a couple of days. Now, one thing I'll probably disagree with, and it depends on it depends on a lot of things. On the product that you're working on, I think if you're in the software world, it's easier to be remote all the time.
Mhm.
I think if you're in the hardware world, um, hybrid is probably more in tune. You know, my experience in robotics, and I know there's some other people on the line from robotics. It seems like uh, it's a great tool to have people in the plant periodically meeting with the whole team. One of the issues with product management and project management, the interface is with so many people. Be it engineering out on the floor, looking at the product, looking at something before it ships, talking to finance, talking to marketing. Um, it just is a valuable capability to be on site periodically. And
Mhm.
so I don't tend to hire people that have no opportunity to be in the office. But by primarily, I work in the hardware field. And in hardware, I think it's maybe it's an old-fashioned mindset. Maybe it's just looking at the product out on the floor. Um, so the ability to find people is somewhat muted because the desire is to have them in periodically into the office or have the capability of coming in the office and not having to fly in. Now, if I can extrapolate on that a little bit, it's really difficult when you're joining a new organization and you're joining it from a remote perspective. It takes a little bit more effort to kind of um, build up that camaraderie of the team. And it
Mhm.
depends a lot on the culture of the organization, the culture of the company, the size of the company too matters a great deal. You know, the smaller the company, I think it goes up quite a bit, the need to be on site. The larger the company, they're used to having multiple locations. You know, when I was at Intel, we'd have a tape out organization in Portland and a you know, circuit group you know, in the UK or something, and the product went around the cycle around the globe every night. And so we were pretty used to these large projects having those types of dispersion of candidate locations. Um, or not candidate locations, but just work locations.
Mhm.
Um, so, you know, gosh, as a new hire, I kind of want to be inside and I want to go meet my boss and I want to go to lunch with that person. And I want to meet my teammates because those are people you're going to spend a lot of time with. But, you know, it's changed a great deal. It has changed a great deal. You
I've
know,
heard.
so you know, I have an opinion. I don't know that my opinion is going to be consistently right. I think it has a lot to do with the product. I think it has a lot to do with the company, and I think it has a lot to do with the organization, the group. Um, a good friend of mine just joined Intel, and he's in a venture capital group, branding group, and seems to be doing just fine joining remotely.
And I think there's probably a difference in dynamic between established long-term teams versus joining a new team that's being built from scratch. I've
Yeah, oh yeah,
found that a number of folks that have hired in to my organization, the folks that were around pre-pandemic, they have the informal network built with, oh, wait, oh, you have this problem, you need to talk to Bob over here. You know, and they kind of have the Rolodex already filled, to use an old term. But they kind of know they have taps into the informal network around the office, and that's been the most difficult to build from a virtual standpoint,
yeah,
especially if somebody's like fully remote on that front. But
yeah. Knowing how to get things done at the company is a key skill for these roles.
yeah.
Yeah, how to push people along or ask for a favor or know where the expertise is sitting. But I think that varies a little bit with software people versus hardware people. Software people are, yeah, they have a different product that they're, and they can share it more easily. Um, Whereas, you know, in robotics, you know, it's not unusual to see, you know, three people sitting around looking at the machine and talking about some of the features or you know, just how that works, you know, and talking to the techs or talking to the testing people. So I think it matters greatly, you know, with the product.
One of the yeah, we've got
So
a few
Tom,
comments in the chat with, yes,
here,
Yeah,
I was going to say the same thing. Do we want to address some of the chat
yeah, I think that
and the
that's
questions?
exactly where I was going next. So Niti, you've been watching some of the notes go past. Did you have any comments? We've got remote opportunities putting downward pressure on Bay Area salaries. Somebody was asking about the hidden costs of remote employees, that when you do decide to have an on-site, people have to fly in and get hotels and that sort of thing. So any comments on that, Niti?
Yeah, for me, in terms of the downward pressure on Bay Area salaries, unfortunately for our Bay Area attendees, that is true. I mean, our clients, again, we focus on bringing in contractors, but they have, and even for salaries for full-time jobs, they have a salary and they don't really care if you live in the Bay Area or in Idaho, because it's fully remote. So yeah, it is kind of normalizing salaries for Bay Areas, and that is unfortunate because it's a very high cost market here, right? But yeah, I think many of our clients have moved to fully remote and a salary range wherever someone lives. In the old world, you know, Bay Area people would get paid more and other places get paid less. We don't see that anymore. I think there's another comment about 98% of startups they talk to are fully remote, and I agree with that. I think some of our prior comments around, you know, culture and, you know, knowing how to work the system and knowing who to go to, that's true. I mean, I, again, used to be on site at my companies, but it's changing. So I think companies have to create those cultures and those structures in a remote world, because that is what job seekers are demanding. And companies that are forcing people to come on site just lose people or have a very hard time recruiting people. So I think that is changing. And yeah, we support a few startups and they don't even have an office. It's fully remote and it's globally remote. So it's just a new way of working. And I think it's going to be here to stay, in my opinion. I think there's another question.
We've seen
Yeah,
a
in
lot
terms
of the
of-
startups managing their funding that they've gotten in, and worries about kind of the economy and inflation and downturns and things. One of the largest sunk costs of a lot of startups was, acquiring office space and getting that in there. So I think many of them are holding off on that.
So that's not what I hear from the few founders I talk to at our clients. It's more that they, it's not about the cost of an office, because honestly, it's pretty cheap right now because there's so many empty offices
Prices
in the Bay
are
Area.
down.
It's really more about getting the best talent anywhere in the world. And their highest cost is really people. And so if you can get the best talent anywhere in the world and it can be cheaper, that's going to help you. A, from getting the best talent, and B, your labor costs are lower. So that's what I see as the driving forces. And also, if everyone's mostly remote, how does it matter where people are?
This is true.
Yeah, so that's my opinion. I'm sure, Nick, you have other opinions and differing opinions.
Well, like I said, it just varies. I'm pretty used to, even at Omron, we had a facility on the East Coast and one on the West Coast. So we were used to dealing with that all the time. I don't want to dismiss remote because I think it's here to stay. I mean, I've been working a hybrid situation for many years. Most people in HR, unless I was in management, I was mostly in the office, but I was in charge of recruiting in Asia for a couple of years, and I would periodically fly to Asia, but I was working in the United States. I had to work some strange hours, and most people who are working remote these days probably would tell you they work more hours than they did when they were going into the office, because they don't have that front time and back time and getting ready time and everything else. So I think it depends a lot on the organization and the product. It just, and the maturity of the organization and the size of there's a couple of dynamics in there. Anello, who I'm working with right now, they don't require that people be in every day, but they require that the ability for people to come in when needed. is really important. And I think uh, somebody had asked a question about if people are, if I was hiring, the facilities in Santa Clara and I was hiring somebody in Idaho, it's costly to fly that person in, and it's a startup, and they're not necessarily going to bear that burden to fly somebody in, put them in a hotel. So they're looking to hire people locally. So I don't think there's a right and wrong answer. I just think it depends on the situation. If you're looking for remote, the beauty LinkedIn has changed their parameters now. We can talk about. It says remote, hybrid, or on site, and so that's kind of a nice way to filter things for people. If you want remote work, um, it it might change the opportunities for you. Um, and I'm a little, this is my opinion. I like going in the office periodically. Okay. I like the separation. My kids are grown. I don't have soccer and homework to do at nighttime and things like that. Um, and I want that interaction with my coworkers, because there's some things you just don't get as well on a Zoom meeting or a Teams meeting. And that discussion, and let's grab this person over here. And um, so, these are opinions, guys.
We probably should have put a poll up to see what what the audience came out with. That would have been fascinating to see.
uh, it's another parameter in recruiting these days, right? It's
Mhm.
um, looking for somebody who's able to come in the office periodically, or uh, quite a bit early on. I found it. So let me give you an example. I took over some recruiting in Taiwan, Japan, Hong Kong, South Korea, and I think a couple other places. So in the beginning of the role, I went out there and I really had to spend a lot of time out there getting to know everybody, getting to know the group dynamics and the situation on the ground out there. But once that was established, I could do a lot of that work from the United States.
Mhm.
So I think that's a dynamic sometimes too. And talking with a couple of my friends, one of my friends who just took on a new role in worldwide manufacturing, he's spending a lot of time on the road, but he knows that in about a year he probably won't be, because he has those relationships and and stuff. So I think building that rapport sometimes, it's another way of doing it. And I know some companies are bringing people in for a while when they first start up for like a training period of
Yeah.
X amount of weeks. Uh, we've benefited from that with the how you can rent apartments, rent places these days. You don't have to put somebody up in a hotel. You can get Airbnb for a month, and that's been handy too. So, you know, I'm not sure I answered the question, but it's an opinion.
Well, this it's an informed opinion, which is always valuable, and seeing things from different angles is always helpful to the audience. Um, one of the questions that came in kind of before the start was, as we've seen product management positions open and companies are trying to source and find people. Um, some of the earlier discussions we had in prior months, we're talking about product management roles that are starting to specialize around, well, this is a growth PM, or this is a, UX centric type of PM, and things kind of, they're starting to get into little niches that are attached to PM roles. And so one of the questions that came in was, are we seeing any trends uh, of like emerging new things that are being asked for the PM role that might not have been asked for, say, 2 or 3 years ago? And so I know, Niti, you talk constantly with a lot of companies that are looking to bring in PMs. Have you seen any kind of new requirements creeping in?
Um, the only thing I'm seeing, if I look back, maybe not just 2 or 3 years, but 20 years ago,
Mhm.
I'm seeing an expansion of the product manager role. So 20 years ago, product marketing people handled like the high level competitive analysis and business strategy and, doing the market definition of the product. and then of course all the launch activities, right? That was mostly product marketing. And then product management was very much an inbound role, like really, taking what product marketing said should be built and then working internally with engineering to get it built. And then once it was built, and I'm overly simplifying, but once the new product was built, then product marketing would launch it. Like that 20 years ago, I think that was pretty normal. Now, to be honest, and my background is mostly product marketing, but now I feel like, or I shouldn't say this is an opinion, what I see in our clients is that the product manager role has expanded. So they're doing more of the strategy, of the product strategy definition. They're doing more of the competitive analysis. They're still doing all the inbound stuff too. And then product management is more involved in the launch activity. So I think the role is expanding. So I think this was one of the previous questions, like, I think, the technical skills for product managers are still really, really important. Like, being able to define the technical requirements of, and the product features, et cetera, of the product. But I think that business acumen is also becoming, more important. That's what I'm seeing in our clients.
Any particular tips on kind of highlighting or balancing the two? Because I've seen resumes that, they said, okay, well, for this one, they needed to get all the technical stuff to get through the filter before they could talk about what they've done from the business standpoint. Then I've seen flip side, it might be the other way around for some. What do you think?
I think in general, I think the technical PM, core technical PM skills still come first, and then the business related responsibilities come second. I also think experience with, development, like agile development methodologies, key. If you're a product owner or scrum master, like those sorts of things, I think are really important for PMs too. And a good way of differentiate if you're a job seeker. And I know there were some questions about, how do I get in? If I'm looking to join a product, as a product manager, I think getting some of those certifications is good. I also know there are some companies that have an associate product manager role, and they're almost like assistant product managers. So you're running a lot of the meetings, et cetera. But I know like Google has, I think they're either assistant product managers or associate product managers, and they're hiring people right out of college. I know Microsoft has that level too, and I'm sure other companies too. Those are just two I'm very familiar with.
Excellent. I think we'll circle back around to the kind of the new entry things in a minute, but I wanted to give Nick a chance to chat in on trends that you've seen. And I know there was a complete wrench thrown into things with the pandemic, that a lot of things were on pause, and then there's probably a second set of wrenches that are mid-flight around uncertainty with the economic conditions. But what have you seen kind of in the listings and the job listings of what people are asking for in the PM roles?
I come, don't take this the wrong way, I come from kind of a biased world, biased in the sense that the PMs that I have hired and have worked with in the past are technical in nature. So somebody without a technical orientation in their education and in their previous roles is generally deemed as not suitable for the role, because the PM role is one of the more difficult roles to hire for when you're recruiting. They interface with so many different people. They have to be an engineer that can talk to people, right? They have to be an engineer that talks to sales, that talks to marketing, that talks to manufacturing, that talks to finance. I've seen rotation programs in the past, but I don't want to get off topic. But my experience is kind of a tunnel a little bit, and it's maybe not as broad as Niti's with the skill sets that are required. Yeah, I'm paying attention to some of the people that are writing things on the questions, and trying to kind of blend that in with the discussion. The nuances of these roles are I have found to be really critical. So going back, like I said, we were talking about remote versus on-site. Um, the Somebody asked if it's technical being an engineer. Yeah, yes. In my world, it's been Megatronics, double E. I haven't done a lot of CS type of things. Mostly I've been in the hardware world. Um, so uh, when the discussion came up about entry level product management people, that is foreign to me. I don't know of. I would say I've hired new product management people, but I haven't really hired um, product management people out of college.
So they were
Um,
transitioning from other technical roles, perhaps?
yes, it's more of a rotation. Or now periodically, I've had people go back to college and obtain more credentials that would be helpful, but they've had a background in something already. Um, a parallelism. At Intel, we were trying to manufacture attorneys for a while, but the types of attorneys we needed were the types of attorneys that already had engineering experience. So we were paying our engineers, our double E's from the design group, to go to law school and come out and be a lawyer, so they could be an effective lawyer in our world. So a product management person that came from um, the design engineering side would already know that stuff. Um, what's capable from a product. It's hard to define a product in the hardware field if you don't know what's the capabilities are or the possibilities are uh, in what we can do and understand that. They
Do,
won't give you the time of day talking to engineers.
do you
Um,
have do you ever run into issues? I've seen this before with a number of companies that in the initial startup they invent a particular type of technology and they get up and running, and the founders, of course, since this is a new brand new technology, uh, had to start from scratch and spin themselves up over a year or so. And then the next wave of product managers that they want to bring in, they say, well, you must have a year experience in we're looking for 3 to 5 years experience on development in VR. And it's like, well, hang on a minute, that
Pass
didn't
them around.
exist. That didn't
Yes.
exist 5 years ago, or at least not in any significant quantity. But somebody may have worked in, say, VFX in Hollywood, and they've done 3D graphics. They just haven't done VR and AR. Do you have trouble getting people to read between the lines of, okay, this is a parallel technology with identical skill sets, and this person will spin up in 30 days, as opposed to and being able to suss that out, as opposed to waiting for 5 years in order to get somebody with 5 years experience?
It happens all the time. We call them unicorns. Sometimes we call them purple unicorns. Managers will define a role with kind of uh, unrealistic expectations. And I want to add an opinion here, and I tell them this. And I had this conversation with a senior director yesterday. I
Mm.
said, find somebody that has 80% of the skills and train them up, because what's in it for them if they're not going to come to a new job and learn some new skills? Hiring somebody with 100% of the skills is unrealistic in most cases, because people want to go do something new sometimes or add to their skill set. And the wait time, I've had positions open that I've talked to executives, and I had one friend call me the other day who had this new role. Some of the jobs have been open for a year because they couldn't
Mm.
find anybody that had the skill set. And I'm like, God darn, in a year you could have trained somebody. Um, and so having and my job as a recruiter is not to bring their expectations down to, they know what they need to get the job done, and somewhere in the middle we got to compromise for that. So I hope I'm answering your question, but you you have to be somewhat flexible with things. People don't come with all the skills, and you're right. They'll ask for 5 years in a field that's only existed for 3. I'm dealing with it right now too. I'm dealing with some gyroscopic technology, which is totally brand new. So we kind of got to vet the conversation around what skills are similar to this, and how's this fit in?
Well, I've had a lot of people groaning and blaming on the ATS system not matching and realizing that, you know, this is a similar skill set. It takes a human being to kind of suss that out sometimes.
Yeah. And contrary to maybe belief, unless a job is filled, I read almost every resume that comes in on an ATS. I know maybe I don't think I'm an outlier. I know a lot of recruiters work for me. There are some companies that make recruiters disposition every candidate before a job is filled, because that's part of their um, how they manage their data. There's a lot of data that goes in on the back end with affirmative action, or just a number of things. I'm always looking for people that might even fit in another job. And that's happened to me quite a bit too, where people don't always apply to the right job, but I try to shepherd them over to the right job. So most everybody, unless a job has been filled and they're just waiting for that person to start, because what typically happens, and this might frustrate people, but I'll give you this little secret that happens. So in the headcount world, there's usually a button, a seat, or a job open. So you can't close the job opening until the butt's in the seat, because it's a headcount thing. And so sometimes a rec gets left open, and maybe a recruiter's sloppy and doesn't pull it down from the web, but the job is still open technically until that person starts. So that job doesn't get filled until the day that person starts. So there are times when people have applied for a job that they've already made a hire, and the rec is going to get closed, and all of a sudden you just get an email saying, thank you for your interest, and everybody gets dispositioned as the requisition gets closed. But if you're out shopping for a job and you're on top of the postings, if you're early on, and LinkedIn will tell you how many people have applied for a job, how long it's been open, things like that. So that's kind of the dynamics of the whole game. But most everybody's resume gets read.
Yeah, I
Yeah.
see Niti was nodding to that. You seem to agree on that. The resumes at least get read by humans probably more frequently than people realize.
Well, I think it's company specific, but at my company, at Stage 4 Solutions, absolutely. For all applicants to a role, we read, a recruiter reads every resume.
Very good.
We absolutely do that. And we don't do it to be nice to applicants. We do it because that's how we find the best candidates.
It's the value add of experience.
Exactly.
So,
and
it's like why you can't be replaced by an algorithm.
I mean, the technology helps. That's more from a sourcing perspective. But when people apply for a job, yeah, of course, we're going to read every resume. And I think there was a question about this, but I mean, a lot of companies have announced hiring freezes, or they've announced layoffs. Absolutely, every day it feels like we read something, but overall, the job market is still very hot, and it is a good time to be looking for a new job. For any of the people on the call who want to look for new jobs, there are more jobs in America than there are people looking for them. I just attended a staffing industry trade show last week, or event last week, and the U.S. Department of Labor statistics show that there are 10 million open jobs in America right now, and there's only 6 million people open to looking for new jobs. So there's a gap of 4 million jobs that are open that there aren't enough people to fill. And when I talk to friends, people are like, oh, those are, restaurant jobs or retail jobs. And yes, they are those, but it is also high-tech jobs also. We work primarily with I only work with high-tech companies, and they're still having a very, very hard time filling their open roles because the job market for high-tech professionals is still very competitive. So it's a great time to be looking for a job. And salaries are higher because companies have to compete for the top talent they want. So that's what we're seeing.
We had a couple of questions coming in from for instance, new graduates that are graduating from schools, as well as potentially somebody who is highly technical and has done software code, but maybe doesn't have the degree. Any thoughts as far as kind of getting in that first rung of the ladder and making that transition from being a student or overcoming kind of the educational non-traditional educational paths, as it were?
May I jump in? So I managed college recruiting for a number of years, and it worked really well. The Intel culture was geared for it. We had a goal, a certain percentage. Um, you know, there was a training mentality, training mechanism for people coming up to speed, and I think they did it really well. I mean, I'm not trying to sell Intel on anybody, but the culture was very supportive of new college grads and the needs around new college grads and the how they brought them into the organization. And I think new college grads typically, I think that, in my opinion, they do better at bigger companies with formalized processes and a way, a career path. Startups are wild; they're all over the board. One day you're doing this, one day you're doing that, and it's a little bit more challenging. The other part of um, the new college grad program, and I don't know if it's a sensitive topic with this group or not, but there's a lot of visa activity involved with new college grads, and a lot of organizations are more suited towards processing that and taking people through the different steps effectively, and more predictably than smaller companies. I've talked to a lot of people that they're trying to get through the visa process and their job descriptions changed 4 times, and they keep kind of going back to the process and trying to get through it. And next thing you know, the company is not supporting it anymore, and they're in a pinch.
Fine.
So new college grads, I would probably, if my kids were coming out right now and with an engineering degree or a bent towards our industry, I would probably send them towards a larger company for that. Now, somebody else asked a question about, there are a lot of technical people, very famous ones, Bill Gates and Mark Zuckerberg and all kinds of people that got out of school. They didn't formalize their degree at the end, and but they can code, they can do all kinds of things. I think the path for them, I found, is more to be a contractor, and then once their skills are proven and vetted, then they get converted. Once those uncredentialed things are difficult sometimes to evaluate, because we've shied away from tests a lot of times. I know they give you these trick questions periodically, and there are some bona fide coding tests. But I finished up a stint opening up a facility for a robotics research center, and we just didn't talk to anybody without a PhD. That's just a reality of that. It's PhDs deciding who they're going to hire, and they're going to hire other PhDs. That's just part of that game. Not that, there's been some great guys. The president of Intel right now was hired at Intel as a technician. Okay. Pat Gelsinger was hired as a technician at Intel. I think it was in Pennsylvania or something. I worked with the person that hired him. He did all of his education then while he was at Intel, working there, and he worked his way up, and now he's returned as a CEO. So, once you're in there, the sky's the limit. Silicon Valley has been not a perfect meritocracy, but pretty darn close, when it comes to technical people.
Interesting. We've got a number of questions kind of just going through the process. So Dave was asking about cover letters. I'm wondering, Niti, if you wanted to.
Yeah. So I did want to make a comment about new college grads.
Yes.
Just because I have kids who are 2 and 3 years out of college, and one of them is a software engineer at Google, and know a lot of their friends who are also recent college grads. And so for people who are recent college grads, or I think the person who asked the question was perhaps at a university helping students get those jobs. So, again, I agree with Nick. There are a lot of big companies have recruiting processes. Another tool that I think a lot of new college grads use is called Handshake, and it is all for like college internships and for new college grads. So I think that's a really good tool that most students should be on. And I think the other thing, like I just presented at Santa Clara University a couple of weeks ago to freshman class, and I was talking about LinkedIn, like, hey, college students, do you have a LinkedIn profile? Is it complete? Have you connected with everyone you know? And many of those college students had not. And so just some of the basics around building your LinkedIn profile and connecting and applying to jobs online and using tools like Handshake, I think are really, really useful for new college grads.
Great
So that's number one. On the college degree point of view, it's interesting because I think, I myself, went to college, got a graduate degree as well, but I think the world is changing on that. So I was talking to, some people a few years out of school, and they were saying even companies like Amazon hire software developers that have gone through like a 4 or 5 month boot camp. And they have college degrees, but they're not software engineers, but there is a path for people without technical degrees to even get development roles. And I think why companies are doing that is because, frankly, it's hard to hire technical folks right now. So they're being more flexible because they have to be. So I think some of the old rules around college degrees are changing, in my opinion, or not. That's not even opinion. It's from what I'm seeing, companies doing now. And then in terms of cover letters, my opinion is that's pretty old school. We don't use cover letters at all. And the reason, and I explained this to my team, so I think cover letters were, really in the world where everything was on a piece of paper. Like when I graduated from college in 1988, we had a standard resume on really nice resume paper. And then we had a cover letter that would customize it, would relate the resume to the job to which you were applying, right? Because the resume was like kind of the standard piece of paper. Now what we do at Stage 4 Solutions when we submit candidates, I'm like, whatever well, let me back up. You do have to relate your credentials to the job you're applying for, but it should be done on the resume. So, pointing out, the specific experiences you have that make you qualified for a job, that should be in the summary. That should be in the key accomplishments. You don't need a separate piece of paper because there is no paper, right? It's all digital. So we say only use your resume, but customize your resume for that job. So whatever you used to say in the cover letter should be on the resume. So that's my opinion.
You don't
on
use a lot of cover
letters.
letters. Somebody else asked a question about referrals. And I think there's some really interesting dynamics these days with referrals. One of the things that's happened, we used to track referrals. In fact, I remember talking to PeopleSoft. I think 80% or more of their hires were from referrals, which I thought was a little bit incestuous at the time. But that's always been a great category for hiring. It's been kind of spun around now. And with LinkedIn, people can see who your contacts are. And there's a lot of backdoor referencing or referrals that way. So referrals still are powerful, but there's also a lot of networking that gets done. And when you apply to a job when somebody applies to a job that I've posted, I can see if they're connected to anybody I know, if they're connected to anybody at the company currently. And if they're a follower of the company. So the dynamics have changed a little bit. So it's really important. Professional reputations are really strong, as they've always been really strong, from a networking perspective. I think Tom mentioned Rolodex earlier. That's an old term. I'm familiar with Rolodex. But networking, all these different phrases they are, but employer referrals still very strong in that world. And I don't know that a cover letter elevates you beyond anybody else. A referral would. And I've had some people boldly go and on LinkedIn and contact the VP, and then the VP comes to me and says, "Hey, this student contacted me. They look good, Nick. Why don't you give them a call?" Okay, I'll call them, and that works too. You know, people get in lots of different ways, but referrals are strong, especially. I don't want to advocate people bypassing recruiting, but if it's necessary, it's necessary. If someone knows somebody and they walk the resume over to a manager, it's great. Referrals, very interesting. I used to, I was in manufacturing in HR, so I hired the first statistical process control people at Intel in the wafer manufacturing organization. So they were friends of mine. So I asked them to apply some of their methodologies to my to the recruiting organization and see how that would what data it would give us. You know, if it would give us something that was really strong. And so even going back way beyond, you know, LinkedIn and Indeed and all that stuff, we use the San Jose Mercury News. Every time we would put out an advertisement in the San Jose Mercury News, our employee referrals would go way up, right, on Monday. So I was basically putting stuff in the Mercury News and spending, you know, $50,000 a week because it was expensive. But my employee referrals went skyrocketing, and my boss was asking me questions. Why are we spending all this money? And I had to show some type of correlation to my budget, especially at Intel when you're dealing with all, you know, mostly engineering-minded folks. You got to have data. So I post on LinkedIn, and I would love to get referrals by posting jobs that way. So yes, referrals are strong.
Very good.
Did I over answer that question? I'm sorry.
No, that was very in depth and definitely informative. I had one question come in through a different channel about social media, and you know, above and beyond LinkedIn, you know, kind of wondering how things have changed on that front. Do people look you up across, and depending on which generation you're in, there's Instagram, there's Facebook, there's MySpace is long gone, but kind of the different social media things. Does it help to put together kind of a persona that matches what they're looking for? You know, does any of that matter, or does it only count against you when they've discovered they've got a video that puts you in a less than good light from your college years that you never erased?
I think we've all been there, so we understand it. It started out years ago when not voicemail, but the voice recording machines that we, you know, if you're old enough to have one of those at your house, and I would tell people that were looking for jobs, make sure the recording on your recorder is professional and not like a sound out of Cheech and Chong movie. You know, that when somebody calls and wants to leave you a professional message, you have a professional greeting on it. So that if you just extrapolate that forward on a lot of things, you know, I've gotten so many resumes over the years, and I just want to be able to read it, you know, colored paper with script writing in a different color that's hard for an old man's eyes to see. I tend to skip over. I've gotten resumes that were exercises in origami, you know, with how they fold out. So keeping everything professional, and I don't go and look at people's social media pages. I know I've heard of organizations do that, but I've had hiring managers. My father would be like, talk to a sales guy. If he has good shoes on, he's a successful sales guy, right? Or he has a good handshake. I've had hiring managers that would then spring it on the candidate when they were taking them out to lunch. You drive, because they wanted to see what condition they kept their car in, you know, if it was clean. So everybody has tricks. When I was in school, I remember there was a story about Wrigley, the guy from the chewing gum organization. He would take people out to breakfast, and he wanted to know if they would season their food before they tasted it. Right? That was an indicator to him. That was his little trick. You know, my little trick is asking sales guys questions that I already know the answers to. and see if they're truthful with me. So everybody has their tricks. But when you're looking for a job, just keep maybe, take the pictures down off social media, change your voice recording, get a professional email address. I've had some very unusual email addresses that maybe are not appropriate for the job search. Just get, your name at gmail.com, not, mushroom man, at Gmail. And I'll just leave it at that.
Anything to add, Niti?
So I know our clients look at our candidates on LinkedIn. So I do think having a really good LinkedIn profile is important. And I do think it needs to be professional. So I agree with Nick on that. So a professional picture. And I think the world's changed. It doesn't have to be corporate, but it's got to be professional, right? So I've seen, even executives that have really casual pictures, but they're still professional. And, I think building references on LinkedIn is really good. People do read them. And so asking old managers or peers to write you references on LinkedIn is a good idea. And making sure your LinkedIn profile matches your resume in terms of you can have more content on LinkedIn profile than on a resume, because a resume still should be like 2 or 3 pages, even if you have a lot of years of work experience. And so you can have more on LinkedIn profile, but it should be consistent, same titles, same dates, same companies. And I see a lot of, people we talk to, candidates, that they're just different, and it should all be matching. So I think LinkedIn profile and it being complete and professional with references is really great. Not so much for PMs, but maybe for PMs, if you have work samples, like if there's presentations you've given or, public examples of your work, you can add those to LinkedIn too. And people do see that, and that's really good. Another thing for job seekers, and a lot of job seekers don't do this, but if you want to be found by recruiters, either in companies or hiring companies or companies like mine, you can put your contact information on your public LinkedIn profile. You can put it down below. It's I think notes or how to contact me. You can put your email and your phone number there if you want to, and you make it much easier for recruiters to find you and reach out to you. So that is important. I'm just giving some tips. As far as the other social networks, we don't go check out people on Facebook or Twitter or whatever. We really don't. And I've never heard a client telling me that they do. But if you are a job seeker, I think, you can do whatever you want in your personal life. Just make those profiles private so the random person can't see all the details. That's what I would say there. But yeah, LinkedIn's got to be really, professional and complete. I think that is really good to do. In terms of networking, I have, just a fun little story. So my child, who graduated from college 2 years ago, wanted to, just explore different technology spaces. And we were brainstorming, and I said, well, why don't you just talk to VCs in this area of interest you have? And he's like, okay. And he's like, they said, how do I do that, Mom? And I was like, just find VCs that invest in the space and send them emails, connect with them, send them emails on LinkedIn, and just be honest about here's who I am. This is what I'm interested in. Could I, talk to you for 20 minutes? And so my child reached out to, I think, 10 VCs in the space, honest emails, honest connection requests, and met with about 9 of them. And these weren't people they knew. They are 2 years out of college, so these VCs had nothing to gain from my child. But it works, it really does work. So I wouldn't discount that networking on LinkedIn.
That's great.
So that's just my additional thoughts on that question.
Yeah, it's a good point. People network that way. I wanted to add one more thing about references. Different industries have different practices about references. The biotech world, a lot of people do the cover letter, or they list their references on their resume because they're coming in biotech, they're coming from a very academic world, and so that tends to be more of a practice. In tech, it's a very old-fashioned thing, references, and most people I hear managers mostly do backdoor references on people that are like, oh, I know somebody over at Cisco. I can ask them if they know this person. Looks like they're linked to them and check them out. I don't know if um, you know nobody gives a. I've had very few bad references in the last 40 years. Okay, anybody gives a bad reference is just dumb. Um, you take that you take care of your references, and whether you feed them lunch, dinner, or a couple of drinks, you get good references out of people. Um, Nobody gives bad references um, with that. But Nitty, it's you know I talk to a lot of people that they just want to pick your brain, and I'm okay with it. One of the things I want to jump back on a little bit. Somebody had asked a question. I really miss the days of job fairs. That was opportunity for people to get right in front of you and meet you. And I hired a lot of people at job fairs over the years, and uh, someone's personality can come through. So I just wanted to throw that in there.
But in the past, pre-pandemic, SVPMA had an annual an annual job fair for product managers. The logistics of that was getting to be slightly difficult as we were getting into the pandemic, and we haven't resurrected it, but we might look at that around this time in 2023 if things have settled down. We'll have to see how conditions are.
Yeah, they haven't even brought them back at college campuses yet.
Mm,
Because I still am in touch with a lot of college people that I've known for the years, and they ask me if I want to participate in virtual job fairs, and it's
not the same.
not the same. I've been to so many different jobs. When we were ramping factories, I went to military job fairs. At the time, it was called NCOA, Non-Commissioned Officers Association, and I would go around to different bases around the country and talk to a lot of people getting out of service.
Mhm.
And that was a real effective way. So it comes back to that virtual versus or remote versus on site. There's still it's hard to build rapport or to get a good. It's harder for me. I'll say that. Uh, I like to be in person when I'm interviewing somebody.
So I was seeing two really good final questions. I think we should touch on. One person was asking whether there was anybody was seeing any bonus or push or ask for certifications in product marketing, product management. There have been a number of different organizations out there that have been doing kind of product manager boot camps or some sort of certification thing. Have companies been asking for that, or if you have that, does that boost your position from what you've seen?
From my perspective, if the hiring manager has that certification, they know the value of it, and so I'll even ask them that question when I would call it an intake meeting when you're getting a requisition the first time. Hey, do you have any certifications? Can you post there? And sometimes it's valuable. LinkedIn, I've seen a lot of things now that skills can be evaluated with an online test, and they get a matching credential on their LinkedIn profile if they've tested high enough. And I look at that too. But I've gotten in the habit of, I go to Google Scholar sometimes. I've hired a lot of PhDs and research positions. So, I go to Google Scholar. I'll go and look and see if people have gone through the evaluation process on LinkedIn to get a certified, whether it be in C or C++ or Python or something like that. So yes, I would say that these specialized certifications are helpful. It just depends on if the hiring manager is familiar with it, probably more so than anything else.
And what do you think, Nini?
I think yes, in general, it is helpful. And I know there was a question around how do you differentiate from competition? And I think certifications is certainly one way. And it proves, you maybe have the skills, but it also shows your dedication to that type of job. So I think, that's
Yeah.
good. It also shows that you're a learner and that you want to invest in yourself. And I think that's important, because I don't care what job you're taking and what company, being able to learn and adapt and grow and change is really important. And so by investing in yourself and that willingness to invest in yourself and learn, I think proves that those personality traits that are super important in any job.
Yeah, that's a really good point.
But in terms of, in terms
Go ahead. No,
of,
that's
are
really
they
good.
must? In terms of, are they must? I don't think they're must. I think it also, we have to back up, and it depends how you're getting in front of hiring managers. So if you are a referral to someone because they know someone, or the hiring manager, then your resume is a lot less important. Let's be honest, right? Because then the hiring manager says, oh, I know Jane and she's awesome. I've worked with her before. Or I don't know Jane, but Jane knows my old boss, and my old boss says Jane's great. And then Jane is going to get the interview. Jane is, already has a leg up on any competition, and has nothing to do with Jane's resume. It has to do with the relationships and the credibility she has, either with the hiring manager or someone who knows the hiring manager. But if you're just applying to jobs and your hiring managers are looking at a resume, then these points of differentiation are really important. I just wanted to bring that up. So it goes back to building your network. That is number one. And then having a great resume with credentials and all of that, and, details about what you've done in the past in the technology areas, that's number two.
Yeah. It's more prevalent in some fields, but did you guys ever post job openings in your organization? Like, as a recruiter, would I come to you and I could post my job opening for product management role?
I'm sorry, you're talking to me?
No, to Tom.
I posted, I've been in and out of enough organizations. It's hard to
No.
generalize.
So as a recruiter, could I post a job opening with your organization?
Oh, with
The
SVP
people-
May. I thought you were going back on. Yes,
No.
actually, we are
okay.
setting up a page. We're setting up a page because there were a number of plugins to the website backend software, and the status of those kept changing, where, we get a recommendation and it wouldn't work as soon as some other part of the website upgraded. And in talking to other product management associations around the US and slightly broader afield than that, most of them have reverted to just having a page that we can update and maintain. So we are stepping away from trying to automatically pull things or any of that, and just setting up an email address. And if you send us things, we're going to have a jobs page that we'll post things on.
Yeah, I've gone to a lot of professional organizations to try to target, because frankly, you put stuff on the web is huge. It's hard for people to find you. They search functionally, and if they're not on for a month, they miss yours, and your job's a month old. So it's really helpful for a recruiter to go to a specialized organization like yourself. Certifications. I do recall there was some Microsoft was going through where a lot of people were getting certified for IT roles. I know there's recruiter certifications that have been prevalent in the past, or SHRM through an HR organization, certain accreditations. PMP has been a big one for product managers. Certifications, I look for it, especially if the candidate pool that you're searching is huge and you want to narrow it down and you want to put in something very specific from a search criteria. I'd put in PMP.
Yeah.
If I was looking for a project management person. And Niti had a very good point. It does show this ongoing desire to improve your skills and add to your skills, and it resonates with a lot of hiring managers, that type of behavior.
Very good. So I think we'll wrap up with one final question, and I'm kind of gluing together three different ones that I saw kind of fly past, and that was kind of on the expectation of what the path is for a candidate. So if they if you're on the hiring side, and you post a job in product management, roughly what are you seeing in terms of time expectations for filling the role? And then on the flip side of that, as a candidate, um, if they're looking at things, are those typically taking, months or weeks to fill? And then how many interview rounds and that sort of thing, just from your general average point? And we'll take Nick's answer first, and then we'll finish up with Nitty.
Oh, darn, I was hoping I have time to think about that one. Um, it, you know, I work with a lot of urgency, and I know candidates want to hear back as quickly as possible, and it seems like it takes forever in a normal world. Not not discounting the last couple of years, it's been crazy. Um, People have been in foxholes, I think, periodically, depending on the news that week, if they're out there looking or if they're just being careful. Um, you know, I so my behavior, I don't know that I think I'm fairly typical in the staffing world when I'm doing these things. I look at resumes every morning with a cup of coffee. I look at every resume that came in on all the jobs I have posted. And I know a lot of people do that, and but not everybody, depending on their workload. And certainly if you're at Amazon, you're getting hundreds every day. Maybe it's impossible. Um, but Managers have a role, and they're usually have a pretty busy job. So I have to get their attention. It generally takes a couple of days, but I push pretty hard. So it looks like we're going slow on our side a lot of times when I talk to candidates that they're like, oh, I forgot, I had sent that 2 weeks ago. And we've been running our butts off over here to make it happen. Um, so generally, I think, you know, the old adage was about 90 days to fill a our targets were to fill an exempt job were between 90 and 120 days. I know it sounds like a lot, but that means when the person gets their butt in the seat too. That might mean a visa process, that might mean a relocation thing. But that was our staffing level agreement, SLA, people would call them typically.
Mhm.
That's changed over the year, I think, with the way dynamics are, but we try to fill stuff within about 60 days in general.
Okay. And then how many interviews does a candidate typically go through?
Um, you know, for I don't, I make the joke to managers when they give me an interview list that has 15 people on it. I look at them, I say, I better get a W-2 for them because we should be paying them for this much time. Okay. So I've tried to uh, and in fact, this is a good example. This role is a difficult role to fill because there's so many stakeholders involved all the time,
Mhm.
um, whether it be sales, finance, etc. So I tried to group the interviews together so that maybe it's a 2-on-1 interview. Uh, I do that to save time and so people can hear the answers. Sometimes I do it because some people are less experienced at recruiting.
Mhm.
Um, and uh, but I've tried to shrink it down so that it's all done within a 2-day period if it's online. Because people start forgetting what they had the conversation about. Um, so I try to get it done in one day. A PM role is probably going to have to talk to like 8 to 10 people, is my guess in most organizations, at least the organizations I've been in, because of all the stakeholders. Now I'm hiring a software person, and they're going to probably talk to 4 engineers and then the CTO, um, and maybe the CEO if we want to sell the person. That'd be a kind of a sales types of interview. Join the team. This is what we got going on. We like you. Come on board. So I try to minimize it, but it all comes back to as a recruiter, as HR, when I was in HR, if you know what you're looking for, you're going to know it when you find it. If you don't have a good job description and it hasn't been vetted, then you interview a couple of people, then you have to go back and rewrite the job description. That's you get a bad reputation. I noticed that in college recruiting, when we interviewed too many people, we got the reputation at Intel. We never hired anybody. We interviewed a lot of people, All right, took over the organization. I think we were at 6 interviews for every one hire that we made. And when I left the organization, I was at 1.6 interviews for every hire we made. And so we had the reputation on campus. Boy, you want to get an interview at Intel because you're going to get a job offer if you get in there. So that was a different time though. Uh, it's changed, but I'm guessing you got to expect in your guys' world to talk to somewhere around 8 to 10 people is my guess.
All right. And then we'll bring our final question to Niti about timeframes and number of interviews and what you've seen from the sourcing companies.
There's no averages. I think it's just so company specific.
Mhm.
And for my team and for myself, we're always encouraging clients to move quickly. And sometimes they do, and many times they don't. But I don't see any averages. I think there might be averages by hiring manager. So even the same company, some hiring processes could be quick and some are slow. And it has a lot to do with the hiring manager and how much of a priority they're putting on filling that role. So that's what I see. In terms of number of people, it's kind of the same. It's all over the board. Sometimes it's 3 or 4 people, sometimes it's 10. I mean, it's just, again, it's really what the hiring manager, how they define the process. So that's not a great answer for people who are looking for a job. But that's the reality. It is just so company specific. And it's really hard to know that when you're looking for a job because, again, it's not even company specific, it's hiring manager specific. So what I would suggest when I'm talking to people who just want career advice, I'm like, you have to cast a broad net and apply a lot of places and network broadly if you're looking for a job, because you just never know what's gonna hit and when it's gonna hit. So that would be my suggestion.
Sounds like good advice, and to not get overly concerned with timeframes since there's so much variation even within a company. So
And what I say is, sorry.
It varies by. I have candidates that are so busy they're unresponsive, right? So there's some ownership on that side too. I'm really busy this week. Can we do it next week? That doesn't create urgency on our part.
And the only thing I say to job seekers, if anyone on this, meeting is looking for a job, like I really say, okay, you can't control what a hiring manager is going to do, what a company's going to do. Unfortunately, you can't control that. Like I know I can't, I want to, but I can't. But you can control your input. You can try to control yourself. So if you have your goals, have metrics around, okay, I'm going to talk to this many people per day. I'm going to apply to this many jobs. I'm going to send out this many LinkedIn connection requests or LinkedIn emails. So you control your inputs. And if you really focus on doing those inputs right, you will get a great job. You might not know when or at what company, but if you do all those inputs, you will get a great job in the field you're looking for. That's what I believe, and that's what I've seen.
That sounds like a great closing note, ending on a positive note with a lot of question marks in the air that we've gone through. So with that, I'd like to thank Nick and Niti for their time and their expertise. We should all be giving a virtual set of clapping hands if you find the button on your emoji keyboard. And definitely thank you so much. This is the sort of valuable expertise that we love to hear from in Silicon Valley, and kind of share back and forth. And if there's something we can do in the future, let us know. Always happy to connect folks, and we will be setting up a job page. So Nick, we can get a couple of your listings up there, and anybody else who's who's looking or hiring. We're hoping to bridge that divide and help network a little bit. And then just a quick reminder for folks, we are meeting for happy hour next Thursday after work at Pedro's. So for those of you in the South Bay, that's a pretty long historied location and we'll be putting out details on the website and on the meetup. So keep an eye out for that. Hope to actually meet a couple of you face to face. It'd be nice for a change. And again, thanks to everyone coming. If you have a colleague that missed this and shouldn't have, keep an eye out on the YouTube channel, and we'll get this posted as well. And with that, wishing everybody a good evening, and thanks once again.
Thanks for the invite. I appreciate it.
Yeah. Thank you, guys. This was fun to talk to you guys. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you, everyone.